inviting me to share my birth story with you. My son Kaden was born on the 5th of February 2013 at 6:21 in Kingsbury Hospital. I've reflected on the circumstances and events surrounding the labor and birth many times, and I'm always filled with gratitude, feeling that my hopes and dreams were more than fulfilled. I went into labor at 39 weeks. It was noon when my waters broke at home. It was not as dramatic as depicted in movies, but it was definitely unmistakable. I called my doula and discussed it with her, and then called my husband. Both came to our home, and after examining my abdomen and checking the fetal heart rate, my temperature and blood pressure, we elected not to go to hospital at that stage. My fear was that I would be immediately medicalized and not given a chance to naturally go into labor. We decided that I would continue as normal, and if by the following morning labor had not started, we would reconsider and inform my gynae. After we made that decision, I felt quite calm, even having to reassure my mom in Namibia that all was well and she should not worry that we were being careless by not going into hospital at that time. My husband and I took a long walk together in the afternoon, and we went to bed at around 9, and shortly thereafter I began to feel contractions. I used the TENS machine lent to me by my doula and remained in bed with my husband while he timed the contractions on a nifty little app he had downloaded, which graphically represented the duration and strength of the contractions. He kept my doula informed throughout this time. I found the TENS machine to be quite helpful, and also liked the control it gave me to do something during the contractions. At about 11 p.m. I felt I needed to move around, and I let my husband sleep as I felt that he would need rest to help me later, while I would be having endorphins surging through my body to keep me going. I used the birthing ball that to this day sits in my son's room and was used regularly when he was a newborn, and still used from time to time for naps, to help me with dealing with the contractions. It was quite empowering to go through this stage alone for about 90 minutes, yet a somewhat comical picture, I would imagine. I needed to use the bathroom a few times as the intensity of the contractions increased, and I was glad that I could do this in the comfort and familiarity of my own home. By about 2 a.m., my doula arrived. She felt that I could still carry on at home. By this stage, what was helping me more than the TENS was focusing on my breath and repeating a Persian phrase, Allahapa, which is a praise of God. I would say this phrase during the contraction and remind myself to relax my shoulders, and to visualize my body preparing itself and visualize meeting my unborn child. I also thought at times of something that a dear friend of mine said, was to think of the many other women throughout the world going through the same as what I was going through, and drew strength from that. There were many times I would stand and lean on my husband or my doula, and they would rub my back, and this physical comfort made me feel very supported and safe. By about 5 a.m., my husband, who is also a doctor, did a sterile VE and assessed me to be about 5 centimeters dilated. I felt that at this point we needed to get to the hospital. We left at about 5:30, and I sat in the back of our car. My husband was not slowing down as usual on the speed humps, but I was in too much of a zen place to say anything. Later he told me he thought a bit of a bumpy ride might be a good thing, and in retrospect it might have been. We reached Kingsbury within 5 to 10 minutes, and I remember it suddenly being so bright yet extremely quiet in the reception and nurses' station of the maternity. I thought I would disturb the peace if I would scream, and my doula just told me not to worry, just say my prayers, as she put it, and I could scream all I wanted. We got to the labor room around 6 a.m. The midwife told me to give them a urine sample, but entering the toilet, I felt I needed to push, so they quickly brought me to the bed to be examined, and she said I was fully dilated. Just before this, I had thought in my mind, I've been so good so far, now I can get some pain medication. I didn't need an epidural, but some pain meds would be great. Well, that was not going to happen. They immediately called my gynae, and I remember this very vividly. My PJs were exchanged for a hospital gown, and my inhibitions went out the window. When told to lie on my back, I firmly said I couldn't. When they asked why, I said because of aortocable compression. And I lay on my left side while they connected the CTG. I asked for Internox, but they didn't have it ready. and they started fiddling to find it. My husband was trying to fix it to the wall piping outlet. I don't think it was working, but I held the mask to my face for a few minutes until I abandoned it altogether. The second stage of labor is so markedly different to the first. Now the contractions were replaced with bearing down, which felt like a sharp burning pain. And I realized, Nura, this does feel sore at the moment, but you have to get your baby out. Everyone in the room was so encouraging. My husband and the gynae at the foot of the bed, Sarah by my side, and the midwife helping the gynae. I really felt I was being cheered on towards the finish line of a marathon. It was perhaps 4 to 6 pushes maximum. By the third or fourth one, the gynae was ready to do an episiotomy. I looked at my doula and my husband. At this point, I was not in a position to be forceful, but they were my advocates. They both voiced my wish not to have a routine episiotomy unless absolutely necessary. In my birth plan, I had stated I did not want a routine episiotomy, but I was also not afraid of an episiotomy. And in my case, I think the cut, which was not painful and which needed 3 sutures, was probably necessary given the circumstances of not having a midwife who was providing perineal support. It did heal perfectly, and you actually forget about it very quickly. I also remember in between the pushes being completely lucid, and at one point I said, but am I doing anything? Each time I stop pushing, it seems his head goes up, and they found this funny, and the gynae took my hand to let me feel my son's head. Then there was that final push and the immediate relief and the sound of our son crying, my body trembling with emotion and joy. And tears were streaming down our faces, my husband and I, and there was a powerful spiritual feeling in the room. My doula helped me to get him to latch within minutes of his birth, and although it felt awkward with positioning, I knew this was something he and I would learn together. Later, the gynae would visit us in the ward, and he said that we had them all in tears, and at our 6-week follow-up, he said he remembers our birth vividly. I was very glad to know that it had had such an impact on him. The nursing staff during the 2 days and nights we were there were very good to us, kind and caring, but also they seemed to be in somewhat awe at how things had transpired and almost kept their distance so as not to disturb my son and our bonding. I kept my son with me throughout the time. I didn't know where the nursery was until the last morning. They never tried to impose anything on me regarding my baby, which I believe is not always the case in hospital. They were, however, quite surprised at my not needing analgesia or any sleeping tablet, but did keep offering. The lactation consultant was very good. All in all, the 2 days and 2 nights we spent there were very special indeed. Thinking back to what factors I would say had a positive impact on the outcome of my son's birth, I would say, firstly, it was having the right information, choosing an antenatal class that suited our needs. I did not want to attend a hospital-run antenatal class, and our facilitators' classes were perfect for us and where we met our doula. It was here also that I went through the trepidation at having unknowingly booked at a hospital dubbed Caesar's Palace. We discussed changing hospitals and choosing a private midwife, but after careful consideration, I decided to stick with the hospital and gynae for a number of reasons. I felt that the strength lay within me and that ultimately there was a higher power protecting my baby and myself. The outcome did not lay solely in the hands of the hospital or the gynae. Reading about the sanctity of birthing and how our bodies are designed to do this. And another important point that was shared in our antenatal class and repeated by my mom often, and also mentioned in one of the books I read, was to break the fear, tension, pain cycle with tools that I had picked up, as well as with prayer and trust. And then support, hiring a doula. I cannot emphasize enough how beneficial it was to have our doula before, during, and after Kaidon's birth. The comfort, physical support, encouragement, the TENS machine and other muti, the standing up for my wishes. And my husband, he was 100% supportive of my wishes and my choices. Also, attending a mother-to-mother breastfeeding support group before the birth of my baby was immensely informative and helpful. The physical, emotional, and mental preparedness was the last group of factors. Keeping fit during the pregnancy, I did Pilates, which I think helped to strengthen pelvic muscles. I did not attend a hypnobirthing class, but I listened to birth affirmations given to me by my doula in the last month, and these definitely resonated with me and helped me to use visualization and relaxation techniques. Writing a birth plan and sharing it with my gynae and submitting it to the hospital. In my case, Although it was in my folder, I doubt that they had time to read it, but at least it allowed me to express my wishes. And one last point that I thought of was just confidence, trusting my body and believing in myself. I think this showed through in the hospital when the nursing staff entered my room and would ask about wet diapers and feedings and prevented them from overpowering me or giving me too many instructions. And with that, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much.